So let me now first share my presentation on the screen, okay, for a while. Okay, we're now on the third session of the week. We're finally approaching the end of this week. So again, thank you so much for again being here inside the class. And I know you have made sacrifices for you to be here, right? So I acknowledge that. So again, it's already considered a small win for everyone. All right. So let us begin our session, of course, by getting to know what to expect for this session so that we can allocate the right amount of time for each segment. We will have here the engage. So we will connect what we've learned for the past two sessions so far, the objective for this session. At the same time, we will also have a few moments for us to test or evaluate your existing knowledge or what you already know about the organ system that we will discuss this afternoon. And of course, we'll have our proper discussion. And then we will have our worksheet number two for this afternoon. And then, of course, heads up. By the way, regarding the um, just a heads up for everyone before I go deeper to our discussion. Uh, just um just as a what do you call this, as a summary, so far based on the system, only 12 students have turned in so far the worksheet number one. So please take note, the deadline here for this worksheet is only until 5 p.m. this afternoon. So hopefully the other remaining 8 students, probably they have forgotten to upload their assign or their worksheets. They are already done, but they have forgotten to upload it or submit it on our class card. So please take note, there are only 12 submissions so far, right? So let me go back to the presentation. So let's now begin with the engaged part of our session. Okay, so again, for this week we have been, yes, Lawrence, no worry. I was already informed by Pauline regarding your situation. Thank you so much for updating me as well. Okay, so going back, for this week you have noticed that our session focuses on the two organ system, namely the respiratory system and the circulatory system. So as you can see, visually, you will notice that in terms of their location, the two organ system are actually very close, proximate. They're very close to another, and also aside from being physically close to one another, the organ system, I mean, the the functions of these organ systems are also very very related. So we already know that the two organ system work together to make sure or to ensure that we get the enough supply of oxygen primarily to the different parts so that they can be used later on as part of the cellular respiration so that each of our cell can undergo the production of ATP, or the production of adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy that is recognized by the body, or the currency, the energy currency that is recognized by the body, and which is also used as fuel for us to function other biological processes or other biological functions in our body. Now, take note that yesterday specifically we've learned the importance of the different parts of the respiratory tract, as they are in charge of making sure that we are able to take in air from the outside, that's and bring it inside our body. We call that the external respiration. And then aside from that, the this organ system is also responsible that making sure that there is enough supply of oxygen, that will be later on transported to the different parts of the body as part of the internal respiration. So our focus now focuses on how bloods transverse or travel to the different parts of our body. Now, as you can see here, um, our body is actually can be compared to a road or railway wherein there are different sections and they are leading to certain different parts of our body. So just like what we had as an analogy last time when we had the first introduction of the circulatory system, um, the blood acts as the vehicle or the medium where nutrients, oxygen, and other gases are being carried to the different parts of the body. And just like any vehicle, there are vehicles will have their smooth, as more smoother um, journey if they will have or they will follow a specific pathway or road. So later on, we'll know these different pathways or roads at the same time the different components of the blood which acts as our medium for transportation. So for this afternoon, our focus or the title of our session is Transversing the Body's Highways, the Human Circulatory System, and this is found on our textbook, pages 29 to 36. Again, this is found on page 29 to 36. So what are our objectives for this afternoon? Number one, this time, we will focus on important terms and processes specifically that use for circulatory system. And then, of course, this time, we will focus now on the different parts and functions for the circulatory system and how does the circulatory system work on its own, specifically at the same time, how does it work together with the respiratory system. So, just like what we did yesterday, this time we'll have an interactive activity. So, let me share here. So, this time, what we will focus now or what we will use as our introductory activity is a cross section of the human heart. Okay? So, as you can see here, um we have just like last time or just like yesterday, you have here certain points on the image, and each of these points actually they are specific parts of the heart. And for us to help us guess what is the name of that specific part of the heart, we have here four options. All right, so let's try this one here again. I am not expecting you that you have mastered this one, but just for the for the sake of interaction, let's us try to guess what's the name of of these parts. Later on, we will clarify them um, as we go through each of these parts together with their functions. All right. So anyone who wants to try, just simply raise or activate your raise hand button. Anyone who wants to try? This time we will try to name here. Yes, anyone? Yes, Marinelle.
Kanang left nga upper nga ano kanang
This
kuan
one.
di sure
Is it?
ay kanang red and naka-highlight di siya.
Yes, naka-highlight then. Your options will be any of these four. Is it the aorta, the left ventricle, pulmonary valve, or the pulmonary artery? So what is your
Pulmonary
guess?
artery sure.
Let's try if it's pulmonary artery. Yes, that is indeed correct. Thank you, Marinelle. Okay, anybody else? Next, we have, okay, Miles. This time, Miles, we have read this. Yes?
Aorta.
Okay, let's try that if it's indeed the aorta. Okay, by the way, I forgot to mention, you might notice on the picture that they are shaded or colored in two different colors. We have one in blue and one in red. Now, I think I mentioned this partially yesterday that When we see this coloring, it means actually that that particular part is carrying what we call as oxygenated or deoxygenated blood. If it's blue, it's carrying deoxygenated blood, meaning oxygen poor blood. And if it's red, it is carrying oxygen rich blood, or we call it oxygenated blood. All right. So let's continue now naming the parts. So this time we have it here. So, yes, Marinel.
Right atrium.
Okay, let's check if this is indeed the right atrium. Right, correct. So opposite to that, what do you think is the name for that? Anyone?
Left atrium.
Yes, Miles.
Left atrium.
Okay, let's check if that is indeed the left atrium. So we have the right atrium on one side and left atrium on the other side. Okay, how about this part of the heart? Is this the right atrium, left atrium, pulmonary vein, or left ventricle? Yes, I was not able to catch that. Yes, Isa, I think it was Isa who raised her hand first. Ah, wala si Isa. Okay, how about Marinel?
Left ventricle.
Okay, let's check if it's indeed the left ventricle. Correct, it is the left ventricle. Okay, next, the next part being highlighted here is this one. Um, yes, we have Rupert.
Sir, pulmonary valve.
Yeah, let's check if it's indeed the pulmonary valve. Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Rupert. Okay, this time we will go here. Another blood vessel on this side. Excuse me. Is this the pulmonary valve, tricuspid valve, pulmonary vein, or the left ventricle? Yes, Isa.
Pulmonary vein.
Okay, pulmonary vein. Let's check if that's correct. Yes, that is indeed the pulmonary vein. Thank you, Isa. Now, next, we have the structure here that divides the heart into left and right side. Yes, Rupert.
Septum, sir.
Okay, let's try if it's indeed the septum. Right, that structure is called septum. Okay, how about this one here? Anyone who wants to try? Is this the tricuspid valve? Yes, Miles. What do you think is the name of this part of the heart? Okay, tricuspid valve. Let's try if it's indeed the tricuspid valve. Unfortunately, that's not the name for that part. So the other options are, okay, let's go to the next person who raised her hand here based on the cue. We have Isa. Yes, Isa.
Right ventricle.
Okay, let's check if it's indeed the right ventricle. Right, correct. It is the right ventricle. Okay, next, let's go to this part. Is this the mitral valve, tricuspid valve, aortic valve, or the pulmonary artery? Anyone who wants to try this part? This is a structure between the right atrium and the right ventricle. That's the clue there. It is a valve, but which do you think is this? Is this the mitral valve, the tricuspid valve, or the aortic valve? Yes, Sophia.
Tricuspid valve.
Okay, let's check if it is indeed the tricuspid valve. Right, correct. So this is the tricuspid valve. Now, what about on the other side? Is this the, yes, Rupert?
Aortic valve, sir.
You want, your guess is aortic valve. Let's try that. Okay, unfortunately, it's not the aortic valve. What's your, yes, Candy? What do you think is the name? Okay, mitral valve. Let's try to choose that. Yes, that is indeed the mitral valve. So one on the right side, it's called tricuspid, while on the left side, it's called the mitral valve. Okay, we're close to finishing this part of our session. Okay, anyone? How about this one? Yes, Jade? What do you think? Okay, superior vena cava. Okay, let's check. Yes, indeed, that is indeed called the superior vena cava. Okay, now let's go to the, I think this is the last part here. Anyone? Is this the right, Gab? Okay, Gab Neri.
Aortic valve.
Okay, let's try if it's this indeed the aortic valve. All right. So we're able to name all of the parts. All right. So that's the name for each part. Later on, we'll go through them one by one. All right. So thank you so much for those who participated for this part of our session. Okay, let's go back to our PowerPoint. So as you can see here, um, take note that the heart is only one component of the circulatory system. And why it is considered a very crucial part of the circulatory system, it's because it is the organ that produces or provides the necessary pressure or force so that blood will continuously flow throughout our body. Since blood is fluid like or liquid like, it needs to have a force for it to flow or move continuously. So in this case, let me emphasize again that the circulation or the movement of blood, they actually are divided into two. um, we have areas that carry the oxygenated blood or the oxygen poor blood, while the areas that are shaded in red or are in red are the areas that carries blood that are oxygenated. Okay, and as you can see here, there are certain areas wherein these blood actually mix, or the two types of blood actually mix. These are of course in the form of, are in areas wherein there are capillaries, and usually there are found on our tissues, layers of tissues, organs, or even on our individual cells. So let us now go back to the different parts of the heart. So please take note that the heart is divided into two. One, they are divided into different, uh, first as a side, you have the left and right side, and then it's further divided into chambers. These chambers are either atrium or ventricle. Aside from the chambers, the heart is also attached with several major blood vessels, mga ugat, right? And these blood vessels primarily connect the heart to the from the body, or toward going back to the body, or it also this certain blood vessel connects the heart to the lungs and the different parts of the body later on. So let's begin with the aorta. So as you can see, aorta is a blood vessel, and this is actually a specific artery. And you'll notice that on this particular blood vessel, it is carrying blood away from the heart. Okay, away from the heart, because as you can see on the arrow, it's moving from the heart, and it is carrying an oxygen-rich blood. This, as you can see, that area is actually shaded in red. Now, opposite to that is we call the superior vena cava. Now, superior vena cava is actually another blood vessel. And as you can see here, it is shaded in blue, and it's actually carrying oxygen poor blood towards the heart. Okay, so it's now ready for replenishing of oxygen. Now, this is the time wherein we will meet the different chambers of the heart. Number one, we have the right atrium. So the right atrium, it's located on the right side, and the word atrium, just like how it is used in the Lemkit Kai Atrium. Atrium is actually a name for a venue wherein people congregate or go together for a certain event. So in this case, the right atrium is a chamber wherein blood is collected or gathered, right? That's why it's called right atrium. So this is where the gathering of blood happens for the first time. Now, Then you have, of course, there are actually four valves, and these valves are actually structures that prevents backflow of the blood or the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. This valve is a structure that makes sure that the blood will only flow in a specific one way direction. Now you have here the pulmonary valve. It's located on the pulmonary artery. So it's towards the lungs. And then we have the right ventricle. So the ventricles are actually the lower chambers of the heart. So this is ventricle. So we have the pulmonary artery. So pulmonary means it is the blood vessel that is connected or connects the heart to the lungs, and an artery meaning away from the heart. So then we have the pulmonary vein. This time it's another blood vessel, but the vein, di ba, it's a blood vessel that carries blood towards the heart. So it is coming from the lungs and going towards the heart. So it is entering the heart for the second time. So the first entrance of the heart is it starts from the right side. It leaves the heart towards the lung, and when it returns to the heart, now replenished with oxygen, it will re-enter, but not on the right side, but this time on the left side. So we have here another gathering of the blood. We call it left atrium. So ang right kay oxygen poor, but on the left atrium, it's now oxygen rich. And then we have the mitral valve, just like the tricuspid valve. It prevents the backflow, specifically now on the left side. And then we have the aortic valve. This is, of course, located on the aorta, which is a primary blood vessel. And then we have the left ventricle. And then we have the septum that divides the heart from left to right. So you will notice that on the aorta, it's a major blood vessel, and there are three smaller branches attached to it. These are actually dedicated for the lower limb, upper limb, and one of that blood vessel is actually dedicated for the supply of oxygen directly to the brain, because the brain is our primary organ for control and survival. So let us now begin let us also highlight the different components of the circulatory system. Take note that the heart is only a portion. Heart is the pumping organ, while the blood is the vessel, the medium wherein it enables us to um, receive the necessary resources, not only oxygen, but other resources in the form of nutrients to the different parts of the body. And then, of course, if we have a vehicle, we need to have a very, um, what do you call this, um, complex pathway where these vehicles will pass through and will move back and forth. So we have here the heart. So just to point out again, it's involuntary. It means that we don't have a conscious control of it. It is automatically done by our brain. And it is about the size of the closed fist of a person. And it pumps blood every day, every second of every day. And it will only stop the moment we are pronounced dead. Okay. Now, let's go to our blood. Aside from being the vehicle, it is also considered the river of life. Because again, this vehicle allows us to get the necessary oxygen and nutrients so that it to the different parts of the body. So again, not only oxygen but as well as nutrients. Now, you need to take note that the blood is composed of different components. We have the plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and then we have our platelets. And each of these components, they also have their own specific functions. We'll have the red blood cells, which is the specific carrier of our oxygen. White blood cells defend our body from pathogens, microorganisms, bacteria, and viruses. At the same time, um, you can also find a specific component in our blood that fights uh, that is useful when there is an opening on our skin, an open wound. It creates a film so that it prevents us from dying or losing so much blood and eventually will die. So, of course, if the injury is very large, the clotting may take longer than if it's a smaller wound. So here we have another visualization of the difference between an artery, vein, and a capillary. So vein, take note, they are differentiated not of the blood they carry, because some veins may carry oxygen poor or oxygen rich blood, but what makes them different from one another is that the movement of the blood. If it's a vein, it's carrying blood towards the heart, in the heart vein, and we have arteries away from the heart. So then we have the capillaries. This is the site, as I've mentioned, wherein the oxygenated blood and the oxygenated blood can actually mix so that there is replenishing of lacking requirements or lacking resources for that specific cell. So let us now have our video for this afternoon. So we only have two guide questions. Number one, I believe I already mentioned this, but again, we will have that later on. What are the four chambers of the heart? And how does the blood flow throughout the heart? Okay, so let me first let me first change my sharing so that we can watch the video.
The heart is a muscle that pumps blood into the entire body through rhythmic contractions, supplying all organs with sufficient oxygen and other necessary substances. The heart is divided into a right and a left side. The two sides are separated by the septum. The heart has four chambers: the right atrium with the right ventricle and the left atrium with the left ventricle. Four valves regulate the flow of blood through the heart, its chambers, and into the circulation. The right and left side of the heart work hand in hand. The right side of the heart pumps blood through the pulmonary artery into the lung, where it is enriched with oxygen. The left side pumps blood to all other parts of the body through the aorta and the systemic circuit. The pumping cycle begins when oxygen-deprived blood returns from the body through the veins, the superior and inferior vena cava, and into the heart's right atrium. When the right atrium is filled with blood, it contracts, and a valve, the tricuspid valve, opens, allowing the blood to flow into the right ventricle. This is called atrial systole. When the right ventricle has filled with blood, the tricuspid valve closes. This prevents blood from flowing back into the right atrium. Now the right ventricle contracts. The pulmonary valve opens and blood is pumped through the pulmonary artery into the lung, and there is enriched with oxygen. This phase is called ventricular systole. After this, the pulmonary valve closes quickly, preventing blood from flowing back into the right ventricle. Oxygen-enriched blood then returns from the lungs through the pulmonary veins and now fills the heart's left atrium. The heart's left atrium contracts, and another valve, the mitral valve, opens and blood is pumped into the left ventricle. As soon as the left ventricle is filled with blood, the mitral valve closes. This prevents blood from flowing back into the left atrium. Now the left ventricle contracts and the aortic valve opens. The oxygen-enriched blood flows into the aorta and is distributed to every organ in the body via the blood circulatory system. The aortic valve quickly closes to prevent blood from flowing back into the left ventricle. At the same time, a new contraction takes place in the right ventricle, and the systemic blood circuit begins anew.
Okay, so let's now answer the questions based from the list of guide questions. The first one we have, what are the four chambers of the heart? Anyone who can enumerate these these four chambers? Okay, we have right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, and then we have left ventricle. So we have right atrium, blue, right ventricle, also blue, meaning they both are carrying oxygen poor blood, while left atrium and left ventricle are in red. This means that they are now carrying oxygen rich blood because it came from the lungs, actually, from the through the pulmonary vein. Now, how does the blood flow through the heart? So take note, just to emphasize again what was mentioned, it begins with the superior vena cava. The superior is actually a blood vessel for the upper part of the body, and then the inferior vena cava collects blood from the different parts of the body from the lower chamber or the abdomen part going down, and then that will go directly to the right atrium and then pass through the tricuspid valve, and then you have the right ventricle. Then it will go up to the pulmonary valve, and then of course you have the pulmonary valve is located on the pulmonary um, artery. And when it comes the this actually this blood vessel here will actually it's actually connected to the lungs, left and right lung. It's not shown here on the image, but it is understood that this will actually connect to the lungs, and we know that in the lungs that's where you have the gas exchange or the replenishment of oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide. So once it re-enters the um, it re-enters the heart for the second time through the pulmonary vein. Take note, it leaves through the pulmonary artery, but it returns through the pulmonary vein, and this time it's now red because it has been replenished with the necessary supply of oxygen, and it re-enters the heart this time on the left atrium, passing through the the mitral valve, and then you have the left ventricle, and then this is the time wherein the blood will leave the heart for the second time, but now replenished with oxygen and ready to distribute the oxygenated blood to the different parts of the body through the aorta. Okay. And of course, you have there the aortic valve, which prevents the backflow of the blood, just like any other valves, like the tricuspid, mitral, and the pulmonary valve. Okay, so do you have any questions so far based on our discussion on the circulatory system? Anyone? Wala ba? All right. So if there are no questions, I believe you already know what will happen next. This is the part wherein we will now answer our worksheet number number 2. So let me go back here. So far, worksheet 1. Okay, sorry. Okay, 17 so far. Okay, so here, more or less, it's the same instruction. Sorry, the same instruction as what you did with worksheet number 1. First of all, you need to click and download the copy of the activity or the file. Read the instruction on the file carefully. This time, the worksheet is about the parts and function of the human heart. And once you're done following and accomplishing, yes, you may either use it as a Word, PDF, or Word, whichever is available for you. Um, so please make sure you rename your file using your family name and section, and then submit the file. Make sure to click the submit button. Okay? Because sometimes you have already uploaded the file but wala siya na fully submit because wala na click ang submit button. So make sure double check that you successfully submitted your work because you have clicked the submit button. Okay, any questions so far regarding the task? Okay, let me okay for a while. There's a request here from Ian. Okay, let me read it. Uh, okay, before let me go to the slide title. I think it's here. Is this the one, Ian? Please confirm if this is the one. Okay, you got the slide. Okay na? Okay. Okay, let me go back to the okay, so now that you have already you're given already the instruction on how to accomplish worksheet number 2, please take note that for tomorrow, yes, for tomorrow, which is our last session for the week, we will end our week with a quiz. So please take note of that. It will cover, of course, the things that we have discussed for session 1, 2, and 3, all about circulatory and respiratory system. So please take note. Okay, questions so far? Concerns? So by the way, for worksheet number 2, the deadline for this is of course also tomorrow, just like worksheet number 1, 5 p.m. Okay, questions, concerns? Okay, so at least download the worksheet now so that you can work on it later on during your most convenient time. Okay, so before I leave the class, in case you were not able to read the message or the announcement that was made by our class officer, our class president Marinel, it has been decided since majority voted that the aesthetic or the theme that we will follow or observe during our individual picture taking for the informal pose will be dark theme. I'm not sure how it is properly described or called. Basta darker theme ang term ni Marinel. But Miles also shared to me a picture or two pictures actually that I also shared on our GC. So for us to have at least sana peg bang tawag na or an idea of what it would look like. Kay basin ang darker theme nato kay kuan sana emo. Sayo lahi ang na visualize or lahi ang concept nato na kan. Okay? So I think it would be described as murag formal, black tie, gangster na murag Korean, something.
Mafia ko na, sure.
Mafia. Okay, mafia. Pero mura man siya ganang sleek na mafia, no? Murag, if I were to
Yes,
describe sleek, murag formal, murag na pagka um 007, murag yun na. Okay? Concerns or questions? Okay, I only need one. I only request one thing from you. Download first the worksheet number 2, and then once you're done, you may now leave the Google Meet and enjoy the remaining 6 extra minutes and enjoy it. Either you spend it eating, watching, or reading manga online or whatever that is. Just make sure that you have download worksheet number 2. And if you're done, you may now leave the Google